Hello there. Welcome to Marriage Unmasked. Today we have a really big topic. We are talking about setting boundaries with your in-laws without causing a lot of conflict and distress in your marriage and in your relationship with your in-laws and everybody else in your extended family. Sometimes some of the biggest conflict and some of the biggest stress in marriage can actually come from your in-laws and the relationship that you have with either or both sides of the in-laws and how you navigate that and how you set boundaries or don't set boundaries with them.
And I have sadly seen this over and over again in the wives that I've coached, and there is so much pain there. What I've seen typically is more like where the wife, she feels like she's competing with the in-laws for loyalty, and she feels very unheard. And then the husband, right, he feels torn between his wife and his parents, and then the couple is really struggling to set boundaries without maybe feeling guilt or anger, right? Really, it can be really stressful and very painful for the marriage when we don't know how to set those boundaries with the in-laws.
So we want to talk about why this is so hard, why this is so difficult. And a lot of times what happens is really you're coming into a marriage with two very different family structures, with two very different almost cultures and ways of doing things. And that difference can cause a lot of tension. It can cause tension in the relationship, but it can also cause a lot of this tension and stress with the in-laws and extended family as well. A lot of times there can be these deeper emotional needs that start to come to the surface because of the differences in the family structure between the two. So maybe it's fear of rejection. That could look like maybe a husband in his family structure. They're always very available to each other. Perhaps they can just drop by unannounced. You take the phone call from your mom or your dad every time because they express love by being like available all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now that when he's married with his wife, and that's not possible anymore to just have this complete availability and just to have his mom just drop by unannounced. And so now he fears setting this boundary because he doesn't want to be rejected by his family because this is the way that they've always showed love. And yet he also has this tension with his wife because now his wife needs more time and needs that boundary to be in place. So that could be one of the issues there. Another one is guilt. And maybe a wife is used to spending the holidays with her side of the family over and over and over again. And now we have to decide which holiday are we spending with which side. Maybe her mom is starting to guilt her, like, well, are we really your priority anymore? You're not coming, you're not coming to Christmas? And now she's like, oh man, I wish I could go. I want to go, but I can't. We've got to set this boundary. And that can be a really a tense time, and there can be a lot of guilt around that, and parents they can really heap that guilt on in that kind of situation too.
Sometimes it can be really subtle, like the like, so you're really not coming.
Yeah.
Right, just even that, or like everybody else is going to be there.
Yep. And how common is that? That is very common, and that can be really painful, especially if you're really trying to please your parents and you want to stay, in a great relationship with them, and then you're feeling this tension and this pressure from them. So guilt can be a factor in this. And another one is misplaced loyalties can also be a big factor, and this could look like many different things. For example, a man is really used to including his father in big decisions. So he's going to make a big purchase. He's talking to his dad about it. He's going to, make a change at work. He's talking to his dad about it. They just have that relationship. And now he's married to his wife, and now she feels like left out of some of these big decisions because he's loyal to his dad. He's constantly going to his dad to like talk through these things. And now she feels like, hey, I'm married to you. I want to be part of this conversation. I don't want you just always going to your dad to talk these things through. Not that it's wrong to get advice from your parents, obviously, but there does have to be some balance there, and there has to be some boundaries there in how you navigate that situation.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember is boundaries aren't rejection. And you don't necessarily, and we've kind of done this both ways, but you don't even need to necessarily say to someone like, I'm setting a boundary with you, right? But it's just something that you do, and it's not about rejecting. You're not rejecting them. It is actually protecting connection in your marriage, and protecting the connection with your family. It's a good thing. And because the thing is, without clear boundaries, that relationship gets stretched thin, right? You're in people pleasing mode, and you're trying to please everybody outside of your marriage, and this is the number one priority now, right? Like, you are a couple, you are one, and that's the number one relationship worth protecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've experienced this tension many, 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 many times. But I'm thinking of one time in particular. My parents were coming over to visit us. I think we were in Michigan at the time. They were coming over to visit, and they were communicating with me about what their plans were to come over. We'll probably do some sightseeing. We'll go, see some things in the area. We won't be there all the time. And then, obviously they're going to spend time with us as well. And then what ended up happening, and also in that they weren't very clear about when they're arriving. And so there's like no set time. And this is a difference in family structures. This is a difference in culture and how they did things. Is you're going to see family. It was somewhat informal and not very like planned out. Like, we're just gonna kind of like play it by ear. And that doesn't work for my family now. Like for Cara and I, that really didn't work. So they ended up coming, and they didn't give us a very clear idea of when they're arriving. So I'm trying to like call them, text them, and they're still not here. So were they going to be here for supper? Were they going to be here for lunch? We didn't know, and there wasn't very clear communication. And then they ended up not doing hard. I don't even know. They didn't do any sightseeing. So we had this expectation then that they were going to kind of be in and out. We were going to have time where they were going to be gone and we were going to be together, and then we would all come together later. So we had that expectation going in, and that's not what happened. They just kind of stayed there the whole time, and maybe they made a different decision in the moment, or they decided not to bother doing that. But there was no communication around that, and there was an expectation set up. So what really needed to happen was I needed to have some clear communication with them. When are you coming? When are you leaving? What is your actual plan? What is this going to look like? So that we could be on the same page as a couple, understanding what this visit would be like, and have some plans and kind of a mindset around it. This is what to expect. That was realistic, and we didn't have that. So it would have been helpful to have boundaries there where that clear communication had happened and we knew what to expect.
Yeah, and I remember then we kind of had a blow up. Adam and I did in our bedroom, but
Yeah.
I think they were able to hear.
Uh-oh, yeah.
Probably. You gave the impression to me that they knew I was upset. And so then it was this more tension on the relationship with them, more tension in our marriage.
Yeah.
It was really painful. It was not a good experience, and it brought pain, I think, for many years after.
Yeah. And pain all around. I mean, pain for us, pain for Cara, pain for them probably too, because there was tension there. And so whenever there's tension, that can hurt all sides. Whereas a boundary would have been really healthy, and it would have protected everybody from some of that pain.
And sometimes with visiting, this is specific to like people coming from out of town to stay at your house. That can be a lot. That can be a lot, especially when you and your in-laws are very different. You have very different lifestyles, right? That can be a lot. I remember one of my chiropractors, who was also a good friend, she was telling me how she always had this boundary that no one stayed overnight at her house more than 2 nights. And I've thought of that many times over the years. Again, that boundary hasn't been set.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of struggle with that a little bit with your family.
Yeah, I did.
Because of some of those things we talked about earlier with the like people pleasing and the fear of rejection or guilt or whatever.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, but this is really about priority, right? And it's about emotional loyalty. Even in Genesis, it talks about leaving your father and mother, and the two become one. It says it all right there. When you get married, your priorities change. Yeah. Your emotional loyalty changes. Now your spouse is your priority, and their emotions matter intensely, right? Like this is your number one. When you are leaving your parents, right? Like that Bible passage talks about, doesn't mean you're cutting them off, right? It doesn't mean we're never going to talk to you. I don't care about anything you say. You can still honor them, but it's now there are new priorities in your life. And sticking together as one, that is the number one priority. And I think that's when things get so painful, because that is the way God created it to be. And you are one. You can't deny that, because you are. And so it's extra painful when all of a sudden your spouse is changing their priorities, or they're acting in a way that shows where their loyalties lie. It's not with you as their spouse, and that's so hard.
Yeah, it is. And really it's such an unhealthy dynamic in marriage when that is the case. A healthy marriage in God's eyes is really where you are still honoring your parents, because that is still something that is God pleasing. Obviously, you want to honor your parents and respect them, but you can honor your parents and still have boundaries. You can honor your parents while you still have your spouse as your number one priority, and you are really dialed in with them, and you prioritize them in the relationship. Prioritize their needs sometimes and often over the needs of your parents and your extended family, because that is God pleasing. You are one flesh. You're not one flesh with your family.
Yeah.
You are one flesh with your spouse.
Yeah.
And you have to get that right. And I think a lot of times, especially us as guys, especially if there's some like wounds or some unresolved things with your parents, and that is often the case. They call it either the father wound or the mother wound or things like that. That can be the case in a lot of guys' relationship with their parents. And because it's unhealed, the guy's not so aware of the fact that he is so loyal to his parents yet. He's deferring to his parents. He's trying to people please his parents. He's still trying to get these needs met as a man that should have been met as a boy. And so that can cause a lot of tension. So you can still honor your parents without obeying them, without putting yourself under them. And this is something that I struggled with many times, and this was really deeply painful in our relationship over and over and over again. And I had some of these unhealed things that I was talking about, where I was trying to be the good boy for my parents still. I was really trying to please them. I was trying to cater to them. I often felt like I was stuck in the middle between Kara and them, which isn't where you want to be. Absolutely not where you want to be as a man.
Yeah.
You need to align with your wife and set boundaries and still honor your parents. That is really how it needs to be. And it wasn't for me. And there were times when I was just not setting any kind of boundary, and I was catering to my parents over Kara and the relationship. And it was really destroying our connection, causing a lot of pain and a lot of anger. And there are still things that we are working through because of that long history of me people pleasing my parents, as opposed to being really strong in my one flesh union with my wife.
Yeah, when you were talking about like still showing up in that little boy energy, I definitely saw that, because I remember there was times and this just kind of blew my mind, and but like you would give them your work schedule, so they knew exactly when you were working and what you were doing, and it was just so creepy to me.
Yeah.
Because it was just, the whole thing was very odd to me, and it struck that chord of like, why is he showing up that way? Like, we are a new unit, like we are one, like I don't understand this. And so
yeah, absolutely. And that's not attractive for a woman, for a man to be still in some little boy energy with his parents. It's not attractive. That doesn't make her feel safe and connected and really secure in the relationship, because she didn't marry a little boy. She married a man, and she wants him to really take ownership for the relationship, take ownership for their connection, and to be able to set those boundaries with his parents. And that is something a lot of guys struggle with, and I know I did for many, many years.
Yeah, and vice versa for the wife, right? If it's the wife whose family is, there's a lot of issues there, she needs to lead in that area. It's not necessarily the husband. He doesn't need to kind of step in with her family. So it's whoever's family you're talking about and setting boundaries with.
And it's interesting because Jesus even had a beautiful example of this, because he had to set a boundary with his own mother and his brothers, because they were trying to manage him. They were trying to control him and his ministry. And he was like, no, that's not happening. Even Jesus had to set boundary with his own mother.
Right, and he wasn't married, but
he wasn't married, right?
It still shows a transition in life, right? Yeah. There's a point when you become a man, when you are a woman, and you leave your home, and in marriage, this is even more important. Yeah. So let's talk about, what do healthy boundaries look like? There are really 4 different areas to kind of think about, and the first one is time. How much time do we spend? And one way you can set a boundary there is like, we love spending time with you, letting them know that, but this weekend, we're prioritizing rest as a couple. And, I've heard some crazy stories from wives that I've coached, like mother-in-laws coming over and knocking on their bedroom windows because the door's locked. It's just sometimes people will walk all over you, right? Unless you set a boundary. That I think is true in a lot of areas of life. And so these things are so important. It's important to let them know what is acceptable or what is not acceptable for you as a couple as far as your time, because time is so precious. And especially if they live close, that could be a big issue, how much time you're spending with them. And, you could be giving so much time to them when you as a couple really need that time to dig deep and heal things in your own relationship, right? So that's a big area. Input is the second one. And that's really about like, what are you allowing to come in, right? What are you hearing? What are you allowing into your heart? And families have a lot of thoughts, right? Some families like mine, they are more than happy to share what they think. and so you want to guard that. And so one example is we hear your thoughts, but we're going to make the decision that's best for us as a couple. And letting them know, okay, if you want to share that, but we're going to make our own decision, right? Another one is access. How much access do they have? And again, like the one lady that I was just talking about, who I was coaching, whose mother-in-law came and knocked on the window, she had locked the door, right, so that the mother-in-law, because she was just coming over and coming in, and so sometimes you have to put boundaries about what they have access to, even into your home. Being really clear with these boundaries too, right? And what do they have access to? Well, like Adam, he had given his parents his work schedule. So um
Like,
sometimes parents have a hard time letting go
yeah,
of their
they
children.
ask for more than they need.
Right. They're kind of still stuck in thinking that they need to parent you. And it can be hard. None of my kids have moved out yet, but I imagine it's hard, especially if that's kind of your whole life is your kids, and then to like see that go away and you need to find something else to do.
Yeah.
And so we have to put a boundary around the access that they have to us as well, and the respect. That's the fourth one, is respect. How they even talk about your spouse, how they talk to your spouse, how they talk to you. This has been a really painful thing for us as well, where there was a lot of really unkind and unhelpful things spoken over me, and Adam has struggled with handling
Really
that.
standing up for that and really like drawing a clear line in the sand and saying, no, you're not going to talk to or about my wife that way. And that, yeah, I have a lot of, regret about that, where I really didn't stand up for her.
Yeah, it's been a deeply painful thing,
Absolutely.
and we totally get it if you guys are there. This can really affect every part of your life, right? As a married couple, it can affect your communication because the pain is just kind of bleeding out into how you communicate. It can affect your sex life. It can affect the intimacy, the openness, the vulnerability. Because if you feel like your spouse's loyalties are somewhere else, even if it's with his parents or her parents, that's painful. So we get it, and we want to help you to move forward and set these boundaries.
Yeah. And something to remember as you set these boundaries is that you want to have an appropriate tone in the way that you set this boundary. Like, you want to stay calm, you want to be kind, um, but you also need to be firm. This is a very emotionally charged situation, and there can be a lot of emotions rising up inside of you, a lot of emotions from parents, a lot of emotions from the spouse, and you really have to stay clear headed and just stay centered and calm and grounded and make the decisions that are wisest for you and your spouse.
And I think that's why it is so important for the spouse whose family you're setting the boundaries with, that they take the lead in that, because chances are the other spouse has been hurt, right? And so if they're trying to communicate, it's going to be probably bleeding out some of their pain. So it is very important for their spouse to take the lead in that and handle their family.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because it's their family. So
Yeah.
like that is their responsibility to be that go-between and to be clear about that. Absolutely.
And it really shows that you care, right? That you see your spouse, you see their pain, and you're going to take the initiative to make sure that doesn't continue. That says a lot, right? That's love in action. Instead of just words like, oh, sorry they said that, or yeah, they shouldn't have done that. Show love in action, not just words.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah. And so when in-laws do overstep, that boundary needs to be set or they're causing pain in the relationship. It's important not to just react in the moment, not to just like let the emotions out, pause to hit the reset button and to have a communication between you and your spouse and get on the same page here. Like, how do you feel? How do I feel? Like, let's actually talk about this. Let's have some clear communication, and let's really come together united as a couple and then set this boundary and then deal with the situation. And again, like Kara said, the person whose family it is, they really need to take the lead on spearheading that and bringing that boundary to them. Just to note too, you're not setting boundaries against your family. You're not trying to punish your family. That's not the point. You are really setting boundaries for your relationship, for your marriage. That has to be very clear in your minds too. This isn't getting back at anybody. This is simply because this is healthy for your relationship.
Yeah, your priority again is your marriage. It's not people pleasing your family. Boundaries really can fall apart when the marriage isn't unified. If one person wants the boundary and then the other one is like, they're just not standing in their strength and being willing to stand for the marriage. That is when things fall apart. So you want to be unified in this, having that intentional conversation about the boundaries, what you each need to feel supported, be open and honest, but not in a blaming way. Share your heart, right? Share your feelings as feelings, not I feel like you always do this, right? But I feel unheard. I feel lonely. Letting them know your actual emotion. And also no blaming of the family. That can also be hard for the spouse to hear, because there is probably some loyalty still to their family. Sure. And so it can be painful to hear your mom is such a blah, 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 right? Or your dad, he's right. That can be hard to hear and kind of almost put your spouse on the defensive again. And so we don't need to blame them either. You can definitely be sharing about what happened and how you feel. And then it's collaborating and it's creating this boundary together.
Yeah, it's so important, and that kindness is such a needed thing all the time. And then if you are caught in the middle, if you're feeling that energy, like I'm caught in the middle here between my spouse and my parents, just know it's not about choosing sides. It really isn't. It is about the proper order. My spouse is number one, and my parents are after that. And that is okay. And so you choose that proper order, and that has to be clear in your mind rather than I'm in the middle. It's I'm with my spouse, and we're going to figure this out together. And then I am going to honor and respect and love my parents, but I'm going to do so in a way that's appropriate to this situation. And then also, if you're feeling second to the family, if you're feeling as if, man, my spouse is just always choosing their family over me, then you obviously need to have that conversation, as Kara mentioned. You have to have that clear communication about how you feel and how that is. But also, if that keeps on happening, you do have to find your own safety. You have to find your own sense of peace inside yourself and get the healing that your own heart needs, because you're feeling some really big pain in that, and you need to have that healed, especially with God, going to God with that, saying, God, I feel less than here. I feel like this is happening, and taking that to the Lord and allowing him to work and praying over the situation, praying over your spouse's heart, and all of that is very important, because you can't force change. You can definitely communicate about your needs, but then you also have to really heal your own heart issues that are going on in that situation.
Yeah, and forgiveness is a big part of that. And I remember having to forgive and forgive and forgive, and the pain would still keep coming up with the in-laws, right? And I had this whole story in my head about who they were to me, and who they were because of how they had acted. And I needed to recognize that was a thought I was choosing, and I could choose other thoughts, and I can also feel those emotions as they come up. It's okay if something triggers me again, and I have to again choose forgiveness and release those emotions, feel them through. They're valid, they matter, and then go back to what's the thought I want to choose to move forward. We can easily get stuck in our own pain, and without realizing we actually still have power here. We're actually not stuck. We have power. We just need to start to practice feeling that, healing those wounds, and practicing forgiveness and releasing that. So that's so powerful. And just remember too, in this whole topic of setting boundaries with the in-laws, boundaries honor God and your spouse, because they are creating safety, right? Order, peace, unity. And we know that from experience, because what happens when you don't have the boundaries is you're creating disorder, unsafety, chaos, pain.
Yeah, you can almost think of boundaries as traffic rules or like traffic lines. Otherwise, it's a free for all on the freeway and people running everywhere, people crashing into each other. And yet it's so healthy and it's so good to have those boundaries, those rules, those laws, because now traffic flows freely and you actually get where you want to go and there isn't all this chaos. So I think it can be a good picture of what boundaries are, because they are very valuable for your relationship.
Yeah. And we know that this is just so painful. And even if it just feels like just so messy and you're hurting deeply and you're like, I don't know how to get through this. God can restore peace. His heart is for you to have peace, peace in your marriage, peace with your in-laws. That is his heart. And he restores it. He does that. So start with the unity between you two. That's the number one. Start with you in your marriage. Prioritize this healing for yourself, and then prioritize the healing for your marriage. And if you are stuck in this pain, and I've worked with many wives who are, I highly, highly recommend that you join Restored, my membership for wives. This gives you the most access to all of our Healing Your Marriage course, which walks you through forgiveness, inner healing, all kinds of things that are helpful, tools that you need to be able to move forward. And now I also have my Femininity Restored course that is available for you as well inside there. And then you get weekly coaching. So you're not alone and stuck in this. And what happens then is often we just keep rolling the same stories, the same pain over and over and over, and it just keeps making deeper grooves in our brains, in our hearts. I want you to move out of that. And I can help you do that inside Restore. That is a really powerful next step. I'll put the link in the show notes and take a peek at it, because it's the most affordable way to work with me and to get the most. I think both of our memberships, for husbands and wives, we're giving you all the tools in there. They are really full of amazing content and tools to help you to get reconnected with your spouse.
Yeah, and my refined membership for men is that too. And I am working on and putting together an inner healing course. I have a mini course now too on inner healing for men, and that is a big issue, because your confidence and your self-worth and all of those things, that is what really makes you strong as a man and able to set these boundaries and do so in a kind and loving and God-pleasing way, and to show up strong for your family. So again, like Cara mentioned, same is true of Refined. You get the Healing Your Marriage course. You get my Inner Healing course as well. And that is something that I'm developing even more. So there will be even more resources in there. And then just the community of other men that are walking that same path and growing together as men is super powerful. So encourage you to check out the link. I'll put the link there as well. Well, we're really glad that you joined us for this episode. We hope it was really powerful and impactful for you. If you need anything, obviously reach out to us, hit like, subscribe to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.